The blood-red sunset painted the dusty streets of Aztec, New Mexico. As Olivia Summers stepped off the stagecoach, her face weary from the 3-day journey that had left her bones aching and her spirit nearly broken. It was 1885, and the promise of a new beginning had lured her westward, away from the painful memories of Philadelphia, and toward the untamed frontier that cared nothing for a woman's past, only her ability to survive its harsh demands. The wind whipped her honey-brown hair as she clutched her single valise, eyeing the rough-hewn buildings that lined the main street. Aztec was smaller than she'd imagined, just a cluster of establishments struggling to maintain dignity against the relentless desert. A saloon, general store, blacksmith, and what appeared to be a modest hotel stood as sentinels of civilization in this wild country. "First time in Aztec, miss?" The driver handed down her trunk with calloused hands. "Yes," she replied, fishing in her reticule for the coins to pay him. "I've come to work for Dr. Williams. I'm to be his assistant." The man's bushy eyebrows rose. "Doc's getting himself a lady assistant. Times sure are changing." Olivia forced a polite smile. At 26, she was no stranger to the skepticism that followed a woman with medical training. Back east, she'd studied under her physician father until his death, then found herself unwelcome in the profession she loved. The advertisement from Dr. Williams had been her salvation, a chance to practice medicine, even if only as an assistant, far from those who had closed their doors to her. "The doctor's office?" she asked, gesturing vaguely down the street. "End of the road, small white building. Can't miss it." The driver tipped his hat before climbing back onto his perch. "Good luck to you, miss." Olivia gathered her belongings and made her way down the dusty street, conscious of curious eyes following her progress. She was dressed plainly but well in a traveling suit of navy blue, her collar high and her hat modest. Still, she was a new face in a small town, and that alone warranted attention. The doctor's office was indeed unmistakable, a whitewashed clapboard building with a weathered sign that read simply, "Dr. T. Williams, Physician." Taking a deep breath, Olivia climbed the 3 steps to the porch and knocked firmly on the door. A minute passed before it swung open, revealing a man of about 60 with spectacles perched on his nose and white hair that stood up in tufts. He looked at her blankly. "Dr. Williams." "I'm Olivia Summers. Your new assistant." Recognition dawned in his watery blue eyes. "Miss Summers? Yes, I had nearly forgotten you were arriving today. Come in, come in." Nearly forgotten, the words echoed uncomfortably as she stepped into the small waiting room. Being forgotten seemed to be her lot in life lately, Doctor. Williams showed her around the modest practice, the waiting room with its 4 chairs, the examination room with its table and cabinets of supplies, and the small room behind that contained a cot where serious cases could be monitored overnight. It was simple but clean, and Olivia felt a flicker of hope that this might be a place where she could put her skills to use. "And through here is where you'll be staying," the doctor continued, opening a door at the back of the building. "It's not much, but it's private." The room was indeed small, just enough space for a narrow bed, a washstand, and a chest of drawers. A tiny window looked out onto a view of dusty sagebrush and distant mesas. "It's perfect," Olivia said, meaning it. After months of uncertainty, any place she could call her own was welcome. "Well, I'll leave you to get settled. We'll start your duties tomorrow. I typically open at 8. With that, Dr. Williams excused himself and retreated to the front of the building. Olivia sat on the edge of the bed, removed her hat, and allowed herself a moment of pure exhaustion. The journey had been long, and while this wasn't exactly the position she had dreamed of, it was a start. She unpacked her few belongings, changed into a fresh dress, and decided to explore the town before darkness fell completely. Outside, the twilight had deepened to purple, and lanterns were being lit along the street. Her stomach rumbled, reminding her that she hadn't eaten since a hasty breakfast at a stagecoach stop. She spotted a small cafe next to the general store and headed toward it, hoping for a simple meal. The bell above the door tinkled as she entered the Aztec cafe. A few heads turned to assess her, then politely returned to their conversations. A plump woman with kind eyes approached, wiping her hands on her apron. "Evening, miss. You must be Doc Williams' new girl. Word travels fast in Aztec." She smiled warmly. "I'm Martha and this is my place." "Olivia Summers," she replied, returning the smile. "And yes, I just arrived today." "Well, sit yourself down. You look done in. Tonight we've got beef stew and fresh bread if that suits." "That sounds wonderful." Olivia took a seat at a small table by the window. As Martha bustled away to fetch her meal, the door opened again, the bell announcing another arrival. Despite her fatigue, Olivia couldn't help but notice the man who entered. Tall and broad-shouldered, he moved with the easy confidence of someone completely at home in his own skin. His face was tanned from the sun, with lines at the corners of his eyes suggesting he smiled often. His dark hair was slightly too long, curling at the nape of his neck beneath his wide-brimmed hat. Several people called greetings to him, and he nodded in acknowledgement, his gaze sweeping the room until it landed on Olivia. Their eyes met briefly, and she felt an unexpected flutter in her chest before she looked away, embarrassed by her own reaction. Martha returned with a steaming bowl and a plate of bread. "Here you are, dear. Oh, and I see you've noticed our Preston." "I beg your pardon." Olivia's cheeks warmed. Martha chuckled. "Preston O'Malley, County Sheriff. Don't worry, all the ladies look twice when he walks in. The man could charm the rattles off a snake if he wanted to." Olivia took a spoonful of stew to avoid responding. She had not come to Aztec to be distracted by a handsome lawman, no matter how compelling his presence. Martha patted her shoulder. "Enjoy your dinner, dear, and welcome to Aztec." As Olivia ate, she was aware of the sheriff taking a seat at the counter, his back to her. She tried not to stare, focusing instead on the surprisingly delicious stew and the comforting sounds of the cafe silverware clinking, low conversations, occasional laughter. For the first time in months, she felt a sense of possibility. After dinner, she paid Martha and prepared to leave, wrapping her shawl around her shoulders against the evening chill. As she opened the door, a voice stopped her. "Miss Summers, isn't it?" She turned to find Sheriff O'Malley standing behind her, hat in hand. This close, she could see his eyes were a striking shade of green. "Yes," she replied, surprised he knew her name already. "Preston O'Malley, County Sheriff." He offered a hand, which she shook briefly. "I make it a point to welcome newcomers to Aztec. How was your journey?" "Long but uneventful, thankfully." "And Doc Williams is getting you settled in all right?" "Yes, thank you, good," he nodded, replacing his hat. "Aztec's a good town, Miss Summers, small but good people. If you need anything at all, my office is just down the street." "That's very kind, Sheriff. Just doing my job. Have a pleasant evening." He tipped his hat and moved aside to let her pass. The night air had grown cooler, and stars were beginning to appear in the vast sky above. Olivia walked back to the doctor's office, acutely aware of the sheriff's gaze following her until she reached the door safely. Inside her small room, Olivia changed into her nightgown and sat on the edge of the bed, brushing her hair with long, measured strokes. Tomorrow would begin her new life here in Aztec. She would prove herself useful to Dr. Williams. She would build a respectable position in this community, and she would absolutely not think about the way Sheriff O'Malley's green eyes had lit up when he smiled at her. The following weeks passed in a blur of activity as Olivia settled into her role at Dr. Williams' practice. The elderly doctor had initially been reluctant to allow her to do more than clean instruments and maintain patient records. But after witnessing her competence when treating a minor's infected hand, he gradually permitted her to take on more responsibilities. Aztec revealed itself to be exactly as Martha had described, small but filled with good people. Olivia came to know the regulars who stopped by the doctor's office. Mrs. Peterson with her chronic cough, old Mr. Gunderson with his rheumatism, young mothers bringing infants for checkups. She took particular satisfaction in helping the women of the town, who often found it easier to discuss certain ailments with her rather than the doctor. She saw Sheriff O'Malley occasionally, tipping his hat when they passed on the street or exchanging brief pleasantries when he escorted an injured prisoner to the doctor. Each encounter left her flustered in a way she found both irritating and thrilling. One afternoon in late October, Dr. Williams left to attend to a difficult birth at her ranch several miles outside of town, leaving Olivia to mind the office. The day had been quiet until the door burst open, and Sheriff O'Malley entered, supporting a young man who was clutching his bloodied arm. "Barbed wire," O'Malley explained tersely. "Got himself caught pretty bad out at the Spencer place. Bring him in," Olivia directed, already reaching for clean cloths. "Set him on the examination table." The sheriff helped the young cowhand onto the table. The man's face was pale beneath his tan, his shirt sleeves soaked with blood. "Doc's not here," Olivia explained as she cut away the ruined shirt. "He's attending a birth at the Donaldson Ranch, but I can help you." The cowboy looked doubtful but nodded, gritting his teeth as she exposed the wound. The barbed wire had torn a ragged gash from his wrist nearly to his elbow. "Sheriff, can you heat some water while I prepare?" she asked, already gathering the supplies she would need. O'Malley nodded and moved to the stove in the corner, his competent movements suggesting he'd assisted the doctor before. As the water heated, Olivia cleaned the wound as gently as possible, relieved to find it wasn't as deep as she'd initially feared. "What's your name?" she asked the young man, partly to distract him and partly to assess his alertness. Tom Bradley," he managed through clenched teeth. "Well, Mr. Bradley, I'm going to clean this thoroughly and then stitch it closed. It's going to hurt, I won't lie to you, but we need to prevent infection." The cowboy nodded stoically. "Do what you need to, madam." Sheriff O'Malley brought the hot water and stood by, ready to assist. "Need me to hold him down, if you would," Olivia confirmed, threading a needle with catgut suture. As she worked, she was acutely aware of O'Malley watching her hands with intense concentration. The sheriff held Tom's shoulders firmly as the young man jerked and cursed through the painful procedure. "You've done this before," O'Malley observed, his voice low enough that only she could hear. "My father was a doctor in Philadelphia," she replied, her focus on the neat stitches she was placing. "I assisted him for many years." "Well, you're doing a fine job," he said. "Doc's lucky to have you." The compliment warmed her more than it should have. "Thank you, Sheriff." When she finished, she bandaged the arm carefully and gave Tom instructions for keeping it clean. "Come back in 3 days so I can check it, sooner if there's unusual pain or redness." The young cowboy thanked her profusely as the sheriff helped him to his feet. "Don't know what I would have done if you hadn't been here, Miss Summers." After they left, Olivia cleaned the examination room thoroughly, her mind replaying the concentration in Preston O'Malley's green eyes as he had watched her work. For the first time since arriving in Aztec, she felt truly seen not as a woman out of place, but as someone with valuable skills. The next morning, a basket appeared on the doctor's porch: fresh bread, preserves, and a small posy of late wildflowers. The note simply read, "For the best medical assistance in the territory, Sheriff P. O'Malley." November brought cooler temperatures and an increase in patients as winter ailments began to circulate through the town. Dr. Williams, impressed by Olivia's handling of Tom Bradley's injury, had begun to rely on her more heavily, sometimes leaving her to manage the practice while he visited outlying ranches. One evening, after a particularly busy day, Olivia was closing the office when Sheriff O'Malley appeared at the door. "Evening, Miss Summers. Got a moment?" "Of course, Sheriff. Is everything all right?" "Just fine," he assured her, removing his hat as he stepped inside. "I was hoping to ask you something." Her heart beat a little faster. "Yes, the town's having its harvest social this Saturday night. Dance and supper at the schoolhouse. I was wondering if you might allow me to escort you." The invitation caught her by surprise. She'd heard mention of the social from patients but hadn't considered attending. "That's very kind of you, Sheriff Preston," he corrected gently, "when I'm not officially sheriffing." "Preston," she echoed, finding she liked the sound of it on her lips. "I'm not much for dancing, I'm afraid." "Then we won't dance," he said simply. "But you've been in Aztec nearly 2 months now and you've done nothing but work. Thought you might enjoy meeting more of the townsfolk in a social setting." His thoughtfulness touched her. "In that case, I would be pleased to accept." His smile was like sunrise breaking over the mesas. "Wonderful. I'll call for you at 6 on Saturday." After he left, Olivia found herself inspecting her wardrobe with dismay. She owned exactly 2 dresses suitable for social occasions, neither of which seemed quite right for a harvest dance. On impulse, she decided to visit the general store the next day. Mrs. Hollister, the storekeeper's wife, was delighted to help. "Going to the social with Sheriff O'Malley, I hear," she said with a knowing smile. "Half the unmarried women in the county have set their caps for that man, but he's never asked any of them to a dance." Olivia felt her cheeks warm. "I'm sure it's nothing like that. He was just being kind to a newcomer." Mrs. Hollister's expression suggested she knew better. "Well, kind or not, we want you looking your best. I've got some lovely blue calico that would suit your coloring beautifully." By the time she left the store, Olivia had purchased not only fabric for a new dress, but also a bit of lace for the collar and some blue ribbon to match. She spent her evenings that week sewing by lamplight, fingers flying as she created something far prettier than her usual practical garments. Saturday evening arrived clear and cool. Olivia dressed with unusual care, pinning her hair in a softer style than her customary severe bun. When she heard a knock at the office door, her heart leapt foolishly. Preston O'Malley stood on the porch in a clean black suit, his hair neatly combed, his hat in his hands. For a moment he simply looked at her, and the admiration in his eyes made her breath catch. "Miss Summers," he said finally, "you look beautiful." "Thank you," she managed, suddenly shy, "and please call me Olivia." "Olivia," he repeated, as if testing the sound of it. "It suits you, shall we?" He offered his arm, and she took it, hyper-aware of his solid strength beneath her fingers as they walked toward the schoolhouse. Lanterns had been hung outside, casting a warm glow over the gathering crowd. Inside, the desks had been pushed against the walls, creating a space for dancing, and tables laden with food lined one wall. "Preston," a voice called, and they turned to see a tall, broad-shouldered man approaching. "Didn't think you'd make it." "Wouldn't miss it, Frank," Preston replied, clapping the man on the shoulder. "Olivia, this is Frank Carlson, owns the livery stable. Frank, Miss Olivia Summers, Dr. Williams' assistant." Frank's handshake was firm. "Heard you fixed up young Bradley right proper. Doc says you've got the steadiest hands he's seen in years." "Dr. Williams is too generous," Olivia demurred, though secretly pleased by the compliment. As the evening progressed, Preston introduced her to what seemed like the entire population of Aztec and the surrounding area. Everyone was welcoming, though she noticed more than a few speculative glances at her hand on Preston's arm. The local musicians struck up a lively tune and couples took to the floor. Preston turned to her. "I know you said you don't dance much, but would you consider one?" "I promise not to step on your toes." Looking up into his hopeful expression, Olivia found she couldn't refuse. "One dance," she agreed. His hand at her waist was warm and respectful as he guided her among the other dancers. Preston moved with surprising grace for such a tall man, and Olivia found herself relaxing into the rhythm. "You lied to me," he said after a few turns around the floor. Her steps faltered. "I beg your pardon. You said you weren't much for dancing, but you're light as a feather on your feet." His eyes twinkled with good humor. "Oh," she laughed, relieved. "I suppose I meant I haven't had many occasions to dance recently. Well, that's a situation easily remedied in Aztec. We're fond of our social gatherings." As the evening went on, Olivia found herself enjoying the simple pleasure of community more than she had anticipated. They shared a plate of food, danced a few more times, and spoke with many of the townspeople. Preston stayed attentively by her side, making sure she was introduced to everyone and never left standing alone. When the hour grew late, he walked her home, their path lit by stars and a sliver of moon. The night had grown cold, and Olivia shivered slightly in her light wrap. Without a word, Preston removed his coat and draped it around her shoulders. It was warm from his body and smelled faintly of soap and leather. "Thank you," she said. "For the coat and for this evening, I enjoyed myself more than I expected to." "I'm glad," he replied. "It's good to see you smiling. You don't do it enough." His observation surprised her. "Don't I? Not when you think anyone's watching." They had reached the doctor's office, but neither made a move toward the door. "You carry yourself like someone who's had to be serious too long." The perception in his words touched something tender within her. "Perhaps I have," she admitted softly. "My father's illness, his death, finding a new path. There hasn't been much cause for lightness." Preston's eyes were gentle in the moonlight. "Everyone deserves joy, Olivia. Even serious lady doctors." "I'm hardly a doctor," she corrected, though the words held no bitterness. Here in Aztec, she was allowed to practice medicine far more than she had been in Philadelphia. "You have the knowledge and the skill, the rest is just papers." He took her hand lightly in his. "May I call on you again?" Her heart quickened. "I would like that very much." "Good night then," he said, raising her hand briefly to his lips before releasing it. "Sleep well." Olivia watched him walk away down the moonlit street, his coat still wrapped around her shoulders. Only when he had disappeared from view did she go inside, her mind filled with the memory of his smile and the warmth of his hand holding hers. The weeks that followed brought a subtle but significant change to Olivia's life in Aztec. Preston began to appear regularly, stopping by the doctor's office with small gifts of fruit or candies, escorting her to church on Sundays, inviting her to join him for dinner at Martha's Cafe. Each encounter deepened her understanding of the man behind the sheriff's badge. She learned that Preston had come to New Mexico territory as a young man, drawn by the promise of open spaces after a childhood in crowded Chicago tenements. He had worked as a ranch hand, a silver miner, and briefly as an Army scout before finding his calling in law enforcement. He spoke candidly of the challenges of maintaining order in a territory still rough around the edges, but also of his deep affection for the land and its people. For her part, Olivia gradually shared her own history, her father's progressive views that had allowed her to study medicine informally under his guidance, the devastating illness that had claimed his life, and the closed doors she had encountered afterward when trying to continue his practice. "Their loss is our gain," Preston said simply when she described how she had been effectively forced out of Philadelphia by professional hostility. His unwavering support warmed her in ways she hadn't anticipated. As December arrived with its crisp air and occasional dustings of snow on the distant mountains, Olivia realized with some surprise that she had found contentment in Aztec. Dr. Williams had become almost fatherly, patients treated her with respect, and she had formed friendships with several women in town, particularly Martha from the cafe and Mrs. Hollister from the general store. And then there was Preston, whose presence in her life had grown increasingly important. She found herself watching for him each day, her heart lifting whenever he appeared. One afternoon, as Olivia was organizing the medicine cabinet, Dr. Williams cleared his throat meaningfully. "Miss Summers, there's something I've been meaning to discuss with you." She turned, concerned by his serious tone. "Yes, doctor, I've received a letter from my daughter in Denver. Her husband has passed and she's asked me to join her there." He adjusted his spectacles nervously. "I've been considering retirement for some time, and this seems like the right moment." "Oh," Olivia's heart sank. If the doctor left Aztec, what would become of her position? "When would you be leaving?" "After the new year," he replied. "But that brings me to my proposition. Rather than closing the practice, I wondered if you might consider taking it over." She stared at him, certain she had misheard. "Taking over, but I don't have a medical degree." "No," he acknowledged, "but you have more knowledge and skill than many who do. This is the frontier, my dear. Out here, what matters is a person's ability to heal, not the papers on their wall." His eyes twinkled. "Besides, the nearest actual doctor is in Santa Fe, 100 miles away. The people of Aztec would far rather have you than no one at all." The opportunity was more than she had dared to hope for. "I don't know what to say, doctor. Say you'll think about it. The practice doesn't bring in a fortune, but it's enough to live on, and the town needs someone with your capabilities." "I'll think about it," she promised, though in truth, her mind was already racing ahead to the possibility of having her own medical practice at last. That evening, when Preston came to walk her to dinner, she shared Dr. Williams' proposal, her excitement bubbling over. "That's wonderful news," Preston exclaimed, his face lighting up with genuine pleasure for her. "I can't think of anyone better suited to take over for the doc." You don't think people will object? To a woman doctor, I mean. Some might grumble at first, he admitted as they strolled toward the cafe. But they already come to you when they're hurting or sick and they trust your care. That counts for more than tradition out here. His confidence buoyed her spirits even higher. I never thought I'd have this chance, she confessed. In Philadelphia, they made it very clear that a woman's place was as a nurse at best, never a physician in her own right. Preston took her hand, a gesture that had become natural between them. Aztec is lucky to have you, Olivia. I hope you'll stay. The warmth in his voice suggested he meant more than just for the sake of the town's medical needs. I think I will, she replied softly. They had reached the cafe, but Preston paused outside, still holding her hand. I'm glad, he said simply, and in the fading light of day, his eyes held a promise that made her heart beat faster. Inside, they were greeted warmly by Martha, who led them to what had become their table by the window. The cafe was festively decorated with pine boughs and red ribbons for the approaching Christmas season. Speaking of the holidays, Preston said after they had ordered, the town holds a Christmas Eve celebration every year. Carols, food, general merriment at the schoolhouse. I was hoping you might attend with me. I'd love to, Olivia said, then hesitated. Though I'll be on call, of course. Babies and illnesses don't observe holidays. Preston smiled. I'd expect nothing less from our town doctor. The phrase filled her with a sense of belonging she hadn't felt in years. Christmas Eve arrived clear and cold, with a dusting of snow that had fallen during the night just enough to make the landscape look magical without impeding travel. Olivia spent the morning with Dr. Williams, taking inventory of medical supplies and discussing which patients might need special attention during the transition of the practice. In the afternoon, she returned to her room to prepare for the evening's festivities. She had spent precious dollars on a new dress for the occasion, deep green wool that brought out the warmth in her eyes and skin. As she dressed, she found herself humming carols under her breath, her spirit lighter than it had been in years. A knock at the office door announced Preston's arrival. When she opened it, she found him standing with a small sprig of mistletoe held above his head, his expression both mischievous and slightly nervous. I thought I might try my luck before we join the crowds, he said, his voice husky. Olivia's heart skipped. They had shared no more than held hands and brief touches thus far, though she had felt the growing tension between them with each meeting. That seems fair, she replied, stepping closer. Preston's free hand came up to cup her cheek, and then he was bending down, his lips meeting hers in a kiss that began gently but quickly deepened as she responded. When they finally parted, both were slightly breathless. Merry Christmas, Olivia, he murmured, his forehead resting against hers. Merry Christmas, Preston, she replied, her hands resting on his chest, feeling the steady beat of his heart beneath her fingers. They walked arm in arm to the schoolhouse, where it seemed the entire population of Aztec had gathered. Children ran about excitedly. A large tree had been decorated with handmade ornaments and candles, and tables groaned under the weight of holiday foods contributed by the townspeople. The evening passed in a blur of carols, conversations, and shared laughter. Olivia found herself truly relaxing, secure in Preston's attentive presence and the warmth of the community that had accepted her as one of their own. As midnight approached, signaling the official arrival of Christmas, Pastor Johnson called for a moment of reflection and gratitude. In the hush that followed, with candlelight illuminating the faces around her, Olivia felt a profound sense of peace. A year ago, she had been alone and adrift. Now she stood in a room full of people who knew her name, surrounded by possibility. Preston's hand found hers in the semi-darkness, his fingers intertwining with hers in a silent promise. The new year arrived, bringing with it Dr. Williams' departure and Olivia's official installation as Aztec's physician. The doctor had been generous, leaving her not only the practice but also all of his medical books and instruments. You'll make better use of them than I will in retirement, he'd said gruffly, waving away her thanks. The transition went more smoothly than she had dared to hope. A few patients, mostly older men, had initially been skeptical about being treated by a woman. But after the alternatives were explained, namely, traveling to Santa Fe or doing without medical care entirely, most had accepted the change with pragmatic frontier practicality. Preston supported her unfailingly, making a point of publicly referring to her as Dr. Summers, despite her lack of formal credentials, and ensuring that any medical emergencies requiring the sheriff's attention were brought directly to her. His confidence in her abilities bolstered her own, especially during the challenging first weeks on her own. Their courtship progressed steadily through the winter months. They took meals together when their duties allowed, attended church side by side on Sundays, and spent evenings by the fire in her small sitting room adjacent to the medical office, talking of everything and nothing. Olivia had never imagined she could feel so comfortable with another person, so understood and accepted. As winter mellowed into early spring, bringing the first wildflowers to the mesas surrounding Aztec, Preston began to speak of the future with increasing frequency. "I've been saving to build a proper house," he mentioned one evening as they walked along the river that gave the town its water. "The rooms above the jail are fine for a bachelor, but a man thinks about more permanent arrangements eventually." Olivia's heart quickened at the implication. "Does he?" Preston stopped walking, turning to face her with uncharacteristic seriousness. "Olivia, you must know how I feel about you." "I believe I do," she said softly, "but I would like to hear it all the same." He took both her hands in his. "I love you. I think I've loved you since I watched you sew up Tom Bradley's arm with those steady hands of yours, calm as could be while he cursed like a mule skinner." She laughed, even as tears pricked at her eyes. "Not the most romantic moment, it was to me." His thumbs traced circles on her palms. "I saw a woman with skill and compassion and courage, and I knew then I'd never meet anyone like you again." "Preston," she whispered, her voice thick with emotion, "I love you too." His smile was radiant as he drew her into his arms, bending to kiss her with a tenderness that made her heart ache. Against the backdrop of the flowing river and the emerging spring, they held each other, two people who had found their place in the world and in each other's hearts. It was decided that they would marry in May, when the weather was reliably pleasant for an outdoor celebration. The entire town seemed invested in their union, with offers of assistance pouring in from every quarter. Martha insisted on baking the wedding cake. Mrs. Hollister organized a sewing circle to help Olivia create a special dress, and the ranchers promised beef for the feast. Through it all, Olivia continued her medical practice, finding that the work grounded her amid the excitement of wedding preparations. Preston, too, maintained his duties as sheriff, though he had begun training a deputy to take on more responsibility. "I'm thinking of running for county commissioner next year," he confided one evening as they sat on the porch of what would soon be their home, watching the sunset paint the distant mountains. "Less dangerous work, more regular hours." "You'd be wonderful at it," Olivia said sincerely. Preston's fair-mindedness and genuine concern for the welfare of the community were exactly the qualities needed in such a position. And a commissioner's wife isn't called from dinner quite so often to chase down cattle rustlers, he added with a wink. She leaned against his shoulder contentedly. "I don't mind, you know, we both have callings that don't observe conventional hours." "True enough," he agreed, dropping a kiss on the top of her head, "though I look forward to having you to come home to all the same." April brought an unexpected challenge in the form of a small outbreak of influenza. Olivia found herself working long hours, moving between the sickbeds of affected families. Preston supported her tirelessly, bringing supplies, helping move patients, and ensuring she ate and rested when she could. By the end of the month, the crisis had passed with only one elderly victim succumbing to the illness. The town's gratitude toward Olivia was palpable, cementing her position not just as a tolerated female physician, but as a respected and valued member of the community. May dawned bright and clear with the desert in full bloom around Aztec. On the 15th of the month, exactly 1 week before the wedding, Olivia was inventorying her medical supplies when Preston arrived unexpectedly, his expression serious. "What is it?" she asked, immediately concerned. "Has there been an accident?" No, nothing like that, he assured her quickly. I realized something and it couldn't wait. What couldn't wait? She set down her pencil, giving him her full attention. When is your birthday? He asked abruptly. The question caught her off guard. My birthday? Yes, in all these months you've never mentioned it, and I suddenly realized I don't know when it is. Oh, she flushed slightly. It's not important. I haven't celebrated it in years, not since my father died. Preston stepped closer, his eyes intent. It is important. You're important. When is it, Olivia? She sighed, a little embarrassed by her reticence. May 22nd. His eyes widened. Next week, your birthday is the day of our wedding, she nodded. It seemed like a good omen when we chose the date, though I didn't mention it because… Well, it's been so long since anyone remembered my birthday, it didn't seem worth mentioning. Preston's expression softened with understanding. When was the last time someone celebrated with you? My father remembered my 23rd birthday just before he fell ill, after that. She shrugged, trying to make light of it. I was alone and there was no one to remember. He took her hands gently. I'm sorry for that, Olivia. No one should feel forgotten on their birthday. It's all right, she assured him. Truly. And now I'll have our wedding anniversary to celebrate instead, which is far more meaningful. Preston seemed about to say more, but a knock at the door interrupted them. Mrs. Peterson had arrived with her youngest child, who had apparently fallen from a tree and possibly broken his wrist. I should go, Preston said, pressing a quick kiss to her forehead. I'll see you tonight for dinner. Of course, she replied, already shifting her attention to her young patient. The week leading up to the wedding passed in a whirlwind of final preparations. Olivia was fitted for her dress, a creation of cream-colored silk with delicate lace at the collar, and cuffs and arrangements were finalized for the ceremony, which would take place in the town's small church, followed by a celebration in the adjoining garden. Preston seemed particularly busy, disappearing on mysterious errands that he claimed were wedding-related but refused to elaborate on. Olivia, caught up in her own preparations and the continuing demands of her medical practice, didn't press him for details. The night before the wedding, following tradition, they spent apart. Martha hosted a small gathering for Olivia and the women of the town, while Preston presumably celebrated with his male friends. Surrounded by the women who had welcomed her into their community, Olivia felt a surge of gratitude for the path that had led her to Aztec. Never seen a happier bride, Mrs. Hollister commented as she helped Olivia pin up her hair in preparation for the morning, or one more deserving of happiness. Thank you, Olivia replied, touched by the older woman's affection. I never imagined finding so much acceptance here. Acceptance, nothing, Martha snorted good-naturedly. You've earned this town's respect, girl, and that handsome sheriff of yours, he'd walk through fire for you, plain as day. Olivia blushed, but couldn't deny the truth of it. Preston's love was a steady, unwavering force in her life, as reliable as the sunrise over the mesas. Morning arrived clear and perfect, the air fragrant with spring blossoms. Olivia dressed with the help of Martha and Mrs. Hollister, her hands trembling slightly as they arranged the veil over her upswept hair. You're beautiful, Martha declared, stepping back to admire the effect. Preston O'Malley won't know what hit him. A knock at the door announced the arrival of Frank Carlson, who had offered to escort her to the church in the absence of any family. Ready, Doc? He asked with a grin when the door opened. Your groom's waiting, and he's about to wear a hole in the church floor with his pacing. Olivia laughed, her nervousness dissolving at the image. We can't have that. I'm ready. The church was filled to capacity when she arrived, the entire population of Aztec having turned out for the occasion. As the small organ began to play and she walked down the aisle on Frank's arm, Olivia had eyes only for Preston, standing tall and handsome at the altar in a new black suit, his face alight with love as he watched her approach. When she reached him, he took her hands in his, and she was surprised to feel something cool and metallic press into her palm. Glancing down, she saw a delicate gold locket. Open it, he whispered. With trembling fingers, she did. Inside, engraved in tiny, precise letters, was the date, May 22, 1886. "Nobody remembers my birthday," she said quietly, emotion making her voice unsteady. Preston's eyes held hers, sincere and deep. "I will remember it every day of my life," he promised. "I had it engraved not just in gold, but here." He placed her hand over his heart. "I've carved the date into my heart, Olivia. You will never be forgotten again." Tears spilled onto her cheeks as the meaning of his gesture washed over her. It wasn't just about remembering a date, it was about seeing her, truly seeing her, in all the ways that mattered. The ceremony that followed felt like a dream. They exchanged vows, promised to love and honor each other through whatever life brought their way, and when Preston kissed her as his wife for the first time, Olivia knew with absolute certainty that she had found her home. The celebration afterward was everything a frontier wedding should be: abundant food, music from local musicians, children playing games in the garden, and enough goodwill to warm the hearts of everyone present. As the bride and groom, Olivia and Preston were at the center of it all, accepting congratulations and well wishes from the community that had brought them together. But it was Preston's gift that meant the most to her: the locket with her birthday engraved inside, and the promise that she would never again feel forgotten on that special day. As the sun began to set, casting long golden shadows across the garden, he led her away from the crowd for a moment of privacy. "Happy birthday, Mrs. O'Malley," he murmured, his forehead resting against hers. "The first of many we'll celebrate together." "Thank you," she whispered back. "Not just for remembering, but for everything, for seeing me when I thought I was invisible." "You could never be invisible to me," he said simply. "You're the light that guides me home." In that moment, surrounded by the beauty of the New Mexico evening and wrapped in the love of the man who had carved her birthday into his heart, Olivia felt a completion she had never thought possible. She had come to Aztec seeking only a position, a place to practice medicine without hindrance. Instead, she had found a community, a purpose, and a love that promised to sustain her through all the years to come. The years that followed proved that promise true. Olivia continued as Aztec's physician, her practice growing along with the town. Preston was elected county commissioner, his fair-minded approach to governance earning him the respect of even his former political opponents. They built a life together that balanced their mutual dedication to public service with their deep commitment to each other. Their home became known as a place of warmth and welcome, open to friends and strangers alike. And every May 22nd, without fail, Preston found some new way to celebrate Olivia's birthday, ensuring that the date carved into his heart was honored with all the joy and recognition she deserved. 5 years after their wedding, they welcomed a son, whom they named Thomas William O'Malley, after Olivia's father and Dr. Williams, the man who had given her the chance to practice medicine. Tom, as he was called, grew into a curious and compassionate boy with his father's green eyes and his mother's steady hands. 3 years later, they were blessed with twins, a boy and a girl they named James and Elizabeth. Their family complete, Preston and Olivia faced the challenges and joys of raising 3 children while maintaining their respective roles in the community. "I never imagined this," Olivia confessed one evening as they sat on their porch, watching their children play in the yard while the sunset painted the distant mesas in shades of gold and crimson. "When I left Philadelphia, I thought the best I could hope for was a quiet life practicing medicine somewhere I wouldn't be noticed." Preston reached for her hand, his thumb brushing over the wedding ring he had placed there years before. "And instead you found a town full of people who can't imagine life without you. And a husband who remembers my birthday," she added with a smile. "Always," he promised, pressing a kiss to her palm. "It's carved into my heart, remember." Time moved forward as it must. Aztec grew from a small frontier settlement into a proper town with a school, a bank, and eventually even a small hospital where Olivia trained a succession of nurses and assistants. Preston served 3 terms as county commissioner before retiring to focus on their ranch, which had grown from a modest homestead to one of the more successful operations in the area. Their children grew, following their own paths, Tom studying medicine like his mother, James taking to ranching with his father's dedication, and Elizabeth combining both family traditions by becoming a veterinarian. Through it all, Olivia and Preston remained each other's steadfast companions, their love deepening with each passing year. And each May 22nd was marked with special celebration, a reminder of the day when a lonely woman had confessed that nobody remembered her birthday, and a determined cowboy had carved the date into his heart, promising she would never feel forgotten again. On their 30th anniversary, Olivia's 56th birthday, their children and grandchildren gathered at the ranch for a combined celebration. The family had expanded to include spouses and 5 grandchildren, with a 6th on the way. After dinner, as twilight settled over the land, Preston led Olivia to their favorite spot overlooking the river. Age had silvered his dark hair and deepened the lines around his eyes, but when he looked at her, she saw the same love that had been there on their wedding day. "I have something for you," he said, reaching into his pocket. "For your birthday." He handed her a small wooden box carved with intricate patterns. Inside, nestled on a bed of velvet, was a gold charm in the shape of a heart. "Turn it over," he instructed gently. She did, and found the date May 22, 1886 engraved on the back, just as it had been in the locket he had given her 30 years before. "You still remember," she said, her voice catching with emotion. "Every day," he confirmed, taking her hand in his. "I told you I carved that date into my heart, and I meant it. It's been there every day since, and it will be there until my last breath." Olivia leaned against his shoulder, watching as the first stars appeared in the darkening sky. The years had brought challenges, illnesses, difficult births, harsh winters, drought summers, but they had weathered them all together, their love a constant in an ever-changing world. "Thank you," she said simply, "for seeing me when I needed to be seen, for remembering when I felt forgotten. For loving me through all of it." Preston's arm tightened around her shoulders. "Easiest thing I've ever done," he replied. "Loving you has been the greatest joy of my life, Olivia." As they stood together under the vast New Mexico sky, surrounded by the family they had built and the life they had created, Olivia knew with absolute certainty that she had found everything she had ever needed: acceptance, purpose, love, and a man who had carved her birthday into his heart, ensuring she would never feel forgotten again. In the years that followed, as they moved into the gentler rhythms of old age, that certainty only deepened. Preston's hair turned fully silver. Olivia's hands developed the slight tremor that sometimes comes with advancing years, but their connection remained undiminished, a testament to the power of love to transform and sustain. And each May 22nd, without fail, Preston found some way to celebrate the woman who had captured his heart in a dusty frontier town all those years ago: the skilled physician with steady hands, the compassionate healer, the beloved wife and mother who had once whispered that nobody remembered her birthday, only to find a man who carved the date into his heart and made it his life's mission to ensure she never felt forgotten again.